And that's why I love this channel so much.
Chatting Tracks. Let's talk music.
Hi, it's Robbie. It's Chatting Tracks. Let's talk music. Let's talk music indeed. Hello, mate. I got an absolute belter for you today. I spoke to the host, the voice, and the legend Rohan Acharya behind the Radio podcast. Now, if you love Queen, this is a one-stop shop for you. It's absolutely fantastic. Quick story about it all. So, during lockdown, horrible time, as everybody knows, I live about an hour from where I work, so I used to go backwards and forwards in my car, and I just listen to different stuff every now and again and put different bits and bobs on. And this Queen podcast came on, popped it on, and I did not stop laughing for an entire hour. Now, these guys love Queen, there's no doubt about it. And what they do, they're going through every single Queen album from the past to the present, and anything Queen related, they're talking about it. I had Rohan Acharya on, the host. He's absolutely amazing guy. We spoke offline for absolutely ages, and I cut the interview down because it would have been about 4 hours long. He's such a lovely man. We spoke about what it means to be a Queen fan, how much he loves Queen. Can you love Queen too much? I don't think so. And how he started the podcast and what they're going to do in the future with it. It's an absolutely brilliant interview. He was such a lovely man to talk to, and I love spending time there. I could do it all day long. He was absolutely brilliant. There'll be links in the description so you can check out the podcast for yourself. You're going to love it. It's absolutely brilliant. I love it. I listen to it all the time. And if you're a Queen fan, it's a must for you. Also, if you can like and subscribe to the channel, because it helps me my musical journey to where I want to get to. I love music. I love talking about it, and you help me do it the more you like and subscribe. So come on, mate. Press that button. You know you want to do it. Let's do this together. If you've already done it, you're an absolute legend. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I can't do it without you, so thank you so much. Either way, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Love and peace.
When you were growing up in your house, was there lots of music around? And was Queen the main thing played in your house, or did that come a little bit later?
That is a very, very big question. So I had to really earn. So basically, I'm. What do they call me? I was born here, but my parents were from India, right? And they were quite a contradiction, because they were quite permissive in some ways and quite modern in some ways, but also very strict in other ways. And one of the areas in which they were that they would take me to see shows and they were profoundly interested in British culture. My mum constantly took me up to the Royal Albert Hall to see stuff. You know what I mean? But they were passionate Anglophiles when they came over, which was, and they infected me with that. But I wasn't allowed access to pop music. That was a no-no, right? So, and until I was probably, I can tell you exactly to when. So, we had a record player in our lounge, and they had a lot of records. A lot of it was Indian classical music. A lot of it was British classical music, and they had the Super Trooper album by ABBA. And so I was allowed to play the Super Trooper album by ABBA, and that was it. And I played it at dinner. I also had a couple of Walt Disney records, and they took me to see the original when I was 6. The original, and I think this is what came in the bug. The original Joseph and Mason Technicolor Dreamcoat, which had Tim Rice as the narrator and Paul Jones as Joseph. And that version of the music is brilliant. It's really funky. So I had that. And those were basically the only records I was allowed to listen to. And then when I was 13, I spent months saving up vouchers off the back of Rice Krispies packets to get and finally got a splash-proof Walkman. And my mate from school, Morton Shift, made me a copy of Alive Magic and gave me that. And so for the first time ever, I was able to listen to music, and my parents didn't know what I was listening to. Nice. So I couldn't get into trouble. And I genuinely, I walked around all day, every day, and I went through battery after battery after God knows, but with this big yellow Walkman that had play, stop, and fast forward on it. Massive rubber buttons.
It was
these headphones in.
Yeah. Proof, yeah.
Yeah, just listen. Yeah, it was splash proof, not waterproof.
Sorry.
It was splash. It wasn't even waterproof. It could handle a bit of rain. And I was listening to Live Magic. And then from there, pretty secretly, actually, it was never officially acknowledged, but very secretively, I started saving up my pocket money. It was £1, 50p or £1 a week for sweets. And I'd save up that for ages to get enough money to get together to get enough together to get a Queen album. I think I'd made a copy of Greatest Hits 1 by that point as well. But I was able to listen to this stuff on this headphone, and I wasn't getting in trouble. My parents didn't know. They didn't approve, but I wasn't getting yelled at. I wasn't getting told off. So that was kind of, it was almost like, I'm not saying it was as bad as being on the east side of Berlin with bootleg cops, you know what I mean? But those were the circumstances. That was essentially, it was under a system of oppression that I began to earn pop music, and it was specifically Queen. I did all of Queen first, and became completely obsessed with them. And then because they're so eclectic, they started to introduce. I started to go, okay, well, I better go find out about U2. I better find out about Metallica. And I formed a band, and so the guys in the band had other tastes. So I'd start to find out more about them. But it was always Queen at the centre of it, to the point where by 1992, so 1989 was the first album I bought. The Miracle was the first album I bought. So this was happening around 1988, I reckon. Yeah, around that kind of age. Maybe a bit young, maybe a bit earlier than that. Around 87, 88 is when that was happening. And then 89 was really exciting because a new Queen album had come out. And it was the first brand new tape that I could get. And I think I was doing my GCSE mocks when it came out. And in between my morning exam, my afternoon exam, I ran down to the Woolies in Wimbledon and bought a copy of it, and then ran back up just in time for the exam. And I was looking at all these songs going, oh my God, what are they going to be? And then I got home, put it on this tiny little tape deck I had. It was all very secretive. So, yes, there was music, but it was primarily classical music. And interestingly, sort of that, I do have a knowledge of classical music. I'm very privately educated, because I had immigrant Indian parents, so they sacrificed every penny they had to give me a private education, and got a scholarship at some point. So, but, again, that sort of grounding of, the whole, the Baroque era and all that kind of stuff, understanding what happened when, who was doing what, all that stuff is in there. It's somewhere back there. But yeah, music was huge for me from the moment Queen appeared. Basically, I became obsessed with it. I learned the piano because I wanted to be Freddie. I started writing songs and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so basically, up until the age of around 11, 12, no, and then from 13 onwards, that's all it was. This one got me through puberty. I've told Brian that. Thank you for getting me through puberty. Tougher than that to his face. Okay, you're welcome.
If you'd had any other band, do you think it would have had the same effect? Like, say you had the Beatles live in Shea Stadium on cassette. Would it have been the Beatles, or was it just something about Queen that you locked into? Given Freddie was Indian as well, was there something to do with the heritage, you think, that grabbed?
So that's a really interesting question. These are good questions.
Thank you, buddy.
So I didn't know that Freddie was Indian because they didn't tell anybody. So I knew he was born in Zanzibar. So I assumed he was white South African and probably a bit apartheid-y, if anything. Particularly because there'd been some fuss over. I didn't really know what it was at the time. I know now that it was a fuss over the fact that they'd done Sun City. So there was some suggestion that they might be ridiculous suggestion that they might be racist. So at the time, no, I think it was just that the music was so awesome. And the Beatles I was aware of, like I'd studied the Beatles at school. So I was sort of aware, I was sort of aware of the Beatles. And Dad was kind of cool with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. There was a bit of that stuff in the car being played. Like I had access to a bit of Elvis, that kind of thing. It was fondly. But this stuff, do you know what? We talk about this a lot, where if you play Queen music to kids, they absolutely love it. It's so, so good. And it's because when they rock hard, they rock really hard.
Yeah.
As when they're doing stuff that isn't as rocky, there's melody or movement or dance. There is something really bold about it. And also the amount of work they put into each one of these tracks has kind of made it timeless. So I think I was aware, and also because we didn't have the internet, so I was like, any scrap of, I found my scrapbook the other year, and it was brilliant. Like the scraps of, I kept any clipping I could find from any newspaper, any magazine, Q magazine or whatever that I could find about them, I'd cut it out, put it in the scrapbook. But I got so obsessed, it became like any time the word Queen was mentioned. So sometimes it was just about the Queen of England, but still, because I helped put in my scrapbook because it said the word Queen. So yeah, hang on. What was the question? I forgot now.
If you did have a band, which would be...
If it was any other band, maybe it's hard to figure. Like around that time, I did investigate the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, a little bit of Led Zeppelin, definitely the Who. I mean, even Bill Haley and the company, because they were so eclectic, they made me go and find out about Atlantic Soul and all that kind of stuff. And it's because they did so many different genres. They were giving me the cues to go and get that music. So I don't know if, like the Rolling Stones are amazing, but they kind of are within a particular lane. Like they're rock and roll, they're blues rock and roll, really. And Queen did, like, how do you factor in Bring Back That Leroy Brown or Body Language? Do you know what I mean? They're just so that there's such a wide ranging. It's not like the Rolling Stones were ever going to do Breakthrough and Crazy Little Thing Called Love.
Yeah, Queen will mix genres, whereas the Stones know what works and they stick to their area.
Yeah.
Should I tell you my Queen journey? How I discovered them?
Yes, please.
I actually discovered them on videotape first, of all things.
Did you get Greatest Flicks?
I did, and there used to be a guy that used to come around, like where we lived, with boxes of videos, and I just saw the spine, and it said Queen, Greatest Flicks. I thought, what's that? And I pulled it out, and they're sitting on the front, like the greatest hits, looking,
Yeah.
I thought, that's really interesting. So I rented it, and then put it on, and it said the screen, they like drinking tea and all this rubbish, which is nonsense. And I thought, this music's really great. And I played it, and I remember it was like a week rental, so it was like Friday to Friday, and I probably played it twice a day for between going to school every single day. And this band is amazing. And then I had to save up my pocket money, like yourself, 50p a week I got, or something like that. And it took me about 4 years, and I eventually bought a copy in John Menzies.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's it, yeah. And each time I got an album, it would add to my... So I'd obsess over how my collection was building, and I'd lay them out. And so each new album I'd get, I'd then listen to that one to death. And then in order to make sure that I wasn't, I'd get the game, listen to that to death, and then, oh God, I've now been listening to the game 20 times a day for 3 weeks straight. I must go back and listen to Live Magic again because otherwise it would feel lonely. So I knew them. Like I started my German GCSE. I actually ended up, can't remember quite how it happened. I think I ended up dropping out of GCSE musical. Well, for whatever reason, I took on German a year later than everyone else. So I did GCSE German. And because I was a year later than everyone else, my German teachers would make me sit at the back of the class and read a book to catch up. And so all I would do is sit at the back of the class, not participate, which everyone found hilarious. And I would sit there and I would write out the entire track listing for every single album in order from memory. That was like, I could do that in a German class. And I'd write it all the way out from the first track on Queen One all the way up to A Kind of Magic, I think it was at that time, or The Miracle maybe, and then I'd then do it backwards. And that would be my German class every day. So that's how obsessed. Yeah, that's how obsessed I don't know if it had been Prince. Okay, who knows? But it was Queen. It was Queen, and I don't know that anyone else quite does it like Queen. I don't think anyone else quite does it like Michael Jackson or Prince or, all of those amazing acts, David Bowie. There's so many. But I think Queen is somehow more robust.
I think it's
for you. Yeah, was it like, because you were getting into all music?
I was, yeah. It was like,
did Queen stand out for you through all of that?
They did, because my dad used to pick me up, because my parents divorced when I was young, and he would put cassettes on, like tape cassettes. And there was every week he played me something brand new. So over the years, hundreds of stuff. And
that's a good dad.
Oh, it was amazing. Steely Dan was the main one that popped out. The Kinks,
amazing,
and then Queen. Yeah. And I remember the Queen one, like the video cassette when I got it, was like a movie soundtrack to say 12 different movies. That's the way I processed it. Like,
that's
when
way of describing it.
It's just, when you got like Another One Bites the Dust, that's like your action movie, and then like Bohemian Rhapsody was your fighting fantasy movie. And to me, that's what they always sounded like 12 different soundtracks of a greatest hits album.
That's beautiful.
You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to describe, but
and like Save Me had that amazing animation blended into it.
Yeah, there you go.
So all that kind of stuff. Like, so then you'd have all, and that's the thing. They weren't just an audio band; they were a visual band. So when they were in the studio, they were epic at what they could do in the studio. When they were then making videos, they sort of created the music video industry in a way. Anyway, with being Madison, but when they did that, they would be the best at that. And then. But really, when it all boils down to it, they were a live band, and when you saw them live, you'd never see anything.
Yeah. It's just, they are just amazing. And it was like every time I played the cassette, like before I got the video, you would just think of, this is this movie, and this movie, and
sure.
So really, as far as I'm concerned, they did a lot of
love that. yeah, I love that. Yeah. I think there's something in that. I think even now, like. Even now you'll get clips. It turns up on my feed all the time of some little 3-year-old in America somewhere fully going for it, doing the whole of We Will Rock. You know what I mean? And I don't think, like, actually, the Beatles the Beatles back then kind of had that effect on them. Like the Yellow Submarine would probably be, to me at that age, was kind of what We Will Rock You would be.
Yeah.
For a kid now, you know what I mean? But what's interesting about Queen is where a lot of those big acts, the access to that music has been, the Beatles. I can't remember who owns the Beatles now, but like you really have to work hard to get a Beatles track in your movie, or to get a Rolling Stones track on your advert or something like that. Whereas Queen, they're not like, you can do whatever you want, but they do make sure that if you ask them, they will seriously consider it. They will probably participate. You will see it in adverts. You will see that music, whether you like it or not. You'll see it in an advert, or you'll see it on a movie or a TV show or whatever. Like, it turns up. They've had a couple of tracks turn up on Cobra Kai, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which means when a kid then turns around and listens to their track, it becomes a teenager and goes on Spotify and starts listening to some of the music. They've heard it. They know what it is. They're familiar with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's to me, I think it's a big part of the recipe as to why they've stayed as relevant and as present as they've ever been. Actually, strangely.
I mean, interestingly as well, I think Queen as a band and an entity are also your musical guidance, and they're also your best friend without being next to you. And I remember, I think when you become a Queen fan, you get solidified as a Queen fan for life. There's no dipping in. You're in, or you're just not in at all. Because I remember, it was interesting. It's obviously I got the videotape around '88, I think it was. Started collecting the albums. Went to school. Everybody knew I listened to Queen. They knew I was a Queen fan. And obviously then Freddie passes away. And then the next day, in the papers, it was, AIDS related, HIV related. And I remember the day after that, I got nothing but abuse at school all day for it.
Really?
Yeah.
Because it turned out he was gay.
Nothing but abuse. It nearly got to fisticuffs, but it didn't. There was just a lot of name calling when you walked down the corridor. So the day before, it was fine. You could listen to whatever you want. The day after, you had a target on your back. And it was that day, I remember going, no, this is what I want and this is what I like. So it doesn't matter. And then, time passes, 30 years rolls by, and then people add you on Facebook and connect with you. And then you're on their feed one day and, something like, These Are the Days of Our Lives comes on, and they go, I love this track, it's one of my favourites. And you think, well, you didn't like it 30 years ago.
Yeah, you farewell. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, I had a slightly different. So I had a slightly different experience, or I remember it slightly differently to that, which is Britpop was exploding at that time. I think same for you, and so all my mates had sort of got that suede haircut thing going on, and they were all like, "This is Happy Monday." That was all the cool stuff.
Yeah,
and Queen were not cool. It was not cool to be a Queen fan. And I was Queen obsessed, so everyone knew it. I was the Queen guy. And I would get teased, and it would be like, Freddie's gay, and I'm like, no, he's not. I remember that in the run. Oh, he's got AIDS, I'm like, no, he hasn't. And I remember that in the run-up to him passing away. And then, it all came out, and he did pass away. And I distinctly remember going, well, if Freddie's gay, then that's fine. It's fine to be gay, and that changed for me. And I think they've informed my politics. I've got a very liberal outlook. I think that's informed by their music, by their attitude, by the fact that they could have a person of colour as their frontman without it ever being an issue.
Yeah,
that they had a gay person or a bisexual person as their frontman. And that being an issue for so many people, that also has informed my politics and the way I look at things, of where people going, I just saw a video the other day of somebody kind of trolling a gay pride event, going, "Oh, this is a public highway, I should be allowed to walk." Yeah, you wouldn't do that on the fireworks in London. You've specifically picked gay pride to do that. You've got a problem with that.
Yeah.
Still. That still annoys me. And so, yeah, Freddie's passing was massive. Like, the ribbon was an important thing. But I do remember on the day that he died, everyone at school who would tease me about being a Queen was really lovely too.
Oh, really?
Absolutely everyone made a point that if I ran into them, they were like, really. And, actually, it turned out everyone absolutely adored Freddie Mercury, of course.
Yeah.
And respected the hell out of Queen, of course. But yeah, I remember a particular friend who used to tease me mercilessly about being Queen. Not in a particularly malicious way, but he would tease me a lot. Like, he'd wind me up.
Yeah.
And he made a point. He'd just put a hand on my shoulder. I'm really sorry. Give me a little hug.
Yeah.
So I had a very different experience of that. And I think I'm probably luckier than you for that, because I think that says a lot about your school, to be honest.
It does, yeah.
But, because, yeah, there was that sector of society that just thought, oh, brilliant, a gay guy has died and he's really famous.
Mm.
And, it was despicable. It was despicable, the way that the news responded to it.
But what was nice,
Really horrible.
when, if you can take nice from it, was that when I was getting that abuse, I was like, I think differently to you, and that's good.
Yeah. You double down and you fight back. And I think we all had that. None of it. We all had to earn being a Queen fan, right? We all had to stand up for the fact that we were Queen fans. It was not. Queen were never. They've said themselves they were sort of never cool. They're cool now.
That's right.
Now they're cool now. It's easy as pie to be a Queen fan.
Yeah.
But then, like you say, it's just a whole load of amateurs glomming on. No time for them. No, it's a broad church, and welcome. But like I found that with the gigs. So the first gig I ever went to in my entire life was the tribute concert, Freddie Mercury tribute.
Wow, cool.
Happened to get a ticket like literally 2 days before. I'm supposed to be off Lider train. No, I'm not going to treat it like that. And I went to the Freddie Mercury tribute on my own. My parents let me. So I was 15 maybe at that point. And so in the space of maybe 3 years, 2 to 3 years from not being allowed to listen to pop music to being allowed to go to the Freddie Mercury was a really big deal. My parents have gone through something. I can see that now. In order to allow me to even do that, it was actually a pretty special thing. And it was an amazing day because absolutely everyone in that stadium was there for one reason, and it was just full of. There wasn't a single grumpy face. Absolutely, I was there on my own as a little kid, very overwhelmed, quite sheltered upbringing, quite still. I had a big rucksack full of like food and drink and stuff. You know what I mean? I don't know what the hell I was doing. I was quite scared. But like, I remember like getting to my seat, and there were two girls next to me. "Are you here on your own?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they were like older than me, and they were like, "Oh, I will look after you." And thank you. Do you know what I mean? And like, could you look after my bag while I go for a week? So I've been there for 8 hours, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But absolutely everyone was utterly lovely, utterly delightful. And we were all pulling in the same direction, and we were all standing up and jumping madly every time a bit of music was being played. And so that was that was the baseline that was established for me as what a Queen gig would be like. Yeah. And certainly I would say that stuck through Paul Rodgers' tours and all that kind of. So I've seen them live on every tour since then. So next time I saw them was at the Brixton Academy with Paul Rodgers. Amazing. Because I used to work on the bars there, in fact, and that I was there. I bought a ticket and I managed to see Queen at Brixton Academy. I'm just stood at Brixton Academy, 3 deep from the front. We'll go, oh my God, it was incredible. At Brixton Academy, it was such a small venue. And then in the sort of, you know, seeing them at Nottingham and meeting Brian and all, you know, always an experience. But I noticed through Adam, something had started to change where the first couple of tours with Adam, I'd be jumping up to. At one point, I was next to Jackie, who owns a Beta fan club, and floods of tears with us all my life, you know, having these amazing experiences. But when I was 40, I took my son to see them at the O2, and we were sat up on the bass player side, so opposite to on the John Deacon side of the O2, and they started to play, so I stood up and started. And everyone around me said, "Oh, can you sit down, actually? We can't see." So, what? and some bloke, some guy a seat away was like, "If you wanted to stand, you should have bought a standing ticket." I'm like, what's happening? And I went, "No, it's Queen. All of you get." So just to finish that thought, was and I've noticed it more and more, where if you're close to Queen, it's awesome. And I had a brilliant experience where I was in a booth with Queenpod listeners on the Bohemian Rhapsody, on the Rhapsody tour, and we all went nuts. I don't think I'd gone that nuts at been allowed to go that nuts at a Queen gig since the Freddie Mercury. I had the best night ever doing that. But singing at the top of your voice, jumping up and down from, you know, that's not allowed anymore, because I think there are more and more, you know, the people that can afford to get these tickets, they're now more and more, you know, the kind of acts that are like, we're going to go because we feel like we should. And I can understand that. Like, I know the Who's greatest hits, and I've been to see them a couple of times because I really wanted to see them. I'd love to see the Rolling Stones. I've never have. I really want to. That kind of thing. And again, Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, I went and saw it, and I didn't know maybe 80% of the songs he played that night. I was like, okay. So I get, you know, same with Bob Dylan. So I get why that's happening.
Yeah.
But it's a bit of a shame that that people are going to those gigs and treating the band, be it playing live on stage, a bit like they're watching telly. Like, sit down, you're in my way. What? Get up and get into it. Like, if you're gonna, like, you know this music, everyone knows another one bites the dust. How much do you sit down and watch another one bites the dust? Doesn't make any sense to me. And interestingly, I went to it's like an official. It's not really a tribute band. I think it's called the Queen Extravaganza Quex, they call it, which is sort of curated by Roger. And there, the tickets are a lot cheaper, and it's only Queen fans that go to see that.
Oh, cool.
And so, yeah, everyone's up and jumping around and dancing to... Like, they suddenly played Lazy on a Sunday afternoon live, and we all jumped up and went, oh my God, I don't sang along, you know. But, yeah, so, anyway, those are the vibes. I don't know, I'm just whittering on and ruining your...
No, I know exactly what you mean.
I was a bit militant about it because the Freddie Mercury tribute just set what's normal for what gig should be was set really high.
Way too high, yeah.
Way too high.
Way too high.
I was a bit disappointed when I saw you two.
You're such a fan that you decided to start a podcast, which is why you're on the show today. Can you talk a bit about how you started that and how the idea came about? And, you know, was it one of those things where you were definitely going to do it, or you just thought, well, I don't know, people might want to listen, or?
Yeah, so there's this guy called Fergus March who I'm very, very good friends with, to the point where I knew him before he was called Fergus March. It was his equity name. He became that. So his real name's Giles. So I was called Giles, and that's why he's called Producer Giles. And he was a big podcast nut, and I wasn't really into it. And I was around his kitchen one day, and he went, listen to this. And he put on a bit of the Conan O'Brien show, and it was Lin-Manuel Miranda talking about Under Pressure. And it was incredible. His analysis of Under Pressure was absolutely jaw-dropping. You should check that out. It's like episode 50 or something like that. I can't remember now. But it was a brilliant analysis, and he was doing it off the top of his head. Like, he was remembering the track exactly and explaining how astonishing it is the way that track's put together. And Giles and I had sort of, you know, he was saying, we should start a podcast, we should do a podcast. He, you know, really? Or we... Who would care if we did a podcast? No one would listen. What are you talking about? I think we tried one once, and it was called Spaceships, Ninjas and Explosions. And the idea was that we would rate all films based on whether they had spaceships, ninjas and explosions. So if it had all three, then that would be the best. So that Star Wars was the best because it had all three. But if it had any one of them, it would be decent. Do you know what I mean? And if it had none of them, then no, it was just worthy rubbish. The Notebook doesn't have any of that, so it's worthy and rubbish. So we'd done a test episode. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. But so we were talking about it, and then I kind of went away thinking. I remember leaning there, and I went home and I looked on my iTunes podcast. There were no podcasts about Queen, zero podcasts about Queen.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I had long known this guy Simon Lupton, who worked for, where we were very tight in the TV world, because he'd been my series producer on the first show that I ever got as a producer. It's my first producer credit. He was series producer on that. He's so brilliant, so supportive. And we'd bonded over the fact that we like Queen. And very, very slowly over the years, he sort of gently let me into the fact that he was actually connected. I think he was earning his way into the Brain Trust over that period of time as well. Like, it was all new, but we really bonded over our love for Queen, so became good friends because of that. So I went to him and said, okay, listen, man, there's no podcast about Queen, and we could just do this. But Giles worked out a very robust way of getting a very clear, simple recording technique for the pod. But so we don't record over the internet, we record ourselves locally, right, and send that into an editor, and they compile it, put it together. So there's no dropout or anything like that. It's actually the same. And so I was hoping, you know, and I was like, look, let's just go. I just want to go through each album track by track, and I don't want to produce it. I want to be in it. That was a big deal. That was really scary for me to say that, because up till that, everything in my life, I was always a behind the scenes guy. So anyway, yeah, I pitched it to Simon, and he went, do you know what? It's a really funny that you happened to mention that to me today, because Matilda Beach and I had a conversation yesterday. This is Simon and Matilda Beach. where she had said, what's all this podcast business about? Is that an area we should get into? And I was aware of John Robbins, and I'd run into him literally a month earlier in Edinburgh, and just called him and said, I'm not civilian, I just want you to know I'm Ro, work in telly, do make comedy and produce, but I'm a huge Queen fan. I just wanted you to know. And oh, brilliant. And that was it, tiny little interchange. And I also knew that Suze Kemner was a huge Queen fan because she'd done a show about me. And so they were the two comedians I had in mind, and, you know, not expected to be on it. I thought, well, Simon will give me the permission. These two comedians will be on it, and I'll probably end up being a little voice the man. But we met once in person in I think December 2019, and sat down and had a chat about what it would be. And John had some really good ideas for it. Suze had some great ideas for it. And then Simon would tell us what was possible and what we needed Queen to do, you know, and whether we could get, you know. And the big thing was that the big thing for me was I wanted to be able to have the music to refer to on the podcast. So that was a key bit that we needed from Simon. So he got us that.
Wow. Yeah.
He said, okay, we'll let you use as much of the music as you want. That was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I think so then the pandemic happened, so we didn't meet again in person for like 2 years. But we recorded all this stuff and we had time on our hands. So yeah, we would look forward to it. But I was so nervous before the first record I threw up.
Really?
I was physically sick about 5 minutes before we started recording, before I got on the Zoom, yeah. But yeah, we really enjoyed ourselves. And it was the highlight for all of us. Like we talked about it a lot, all four of us, all four of us through the pandemic. And then also we started to get the response as it started to go out. And the response was beautiful from everyone going, God, you're really getting through the pandemic. Like, really emotional, and from all over the world. And that was also amazing.
Yeah.
And it was really popular and it did really well, but it was never quite exploded, right? You couldn't, it wasn't becoming the, whatever it is, the Chris Ramsey podcast at number one. It wasn't that, but we were regularly at the top of the music commentary charts. We had a really loyal, beautiful, brilliant followers. Someone set up, a lovely lady called Sarah Chapman set up a Facebook fan page, and they all got really involved. And it was genuinely moving, I think, for all four of us. I remember Suze going at the end of one of the calls, yeah, no, and I was just saying thank you. I'd always say thanks to them after you finish. And Suze went, yeah, no, it's fine, it's best job ever. You know what I mean? Yeah. We all felt that. But once the pandemic had lifted, and particularly, me and Simon, we had production schedules. We were getting back to work and all that kind of stuff. It became quite difficult. Like, I was trying to keep up records alongside being in production on things, which was very difficult. But for Suze and John, their performers and their whole schedules were really starting to pick up again, and increasingly so. And it just got harder and harder for us to find the time to meet up. To the point where, in the end, I think the combination of how hard it was for us to get together, that we were starting to, by the end of it, it was only really me and Simon, and then Suze would guest on a couple and John guest on a couple. It was just getting, it wasn't what it had started out being. And equally, the whole thing hadn't, like, from the Queen perspective as well, it was the biggest podcast on the planet or anything. It was doing great and servicing the fact that they loved it, they cherished it. But when we looked at it all as a whole, we're like, well, hang on, what is the point of doing it this way? It's not quite what any of us want it to be. And so we thought the most sensible, and Simon said, well, look, there's no point, at no point should we ever be doing anything about Queen where we're starting to you know, that the Queen should be making us feel bad anyway. And I think for four of us, it was started for different reasons. We were feeling guilt around it, or quite wanted to. Do you know what I mean? We weren't feeling good about it. And so we knocked it on the head. Well, what I will say is, it took us the period of time it took us to get everything lined up with Acast and Queen and the four of it and all of that. In the meantime, some lads up in Scotland started doing In the Lap of the Pods. Like, so when we started this process in December autumn 2019, there were no Queen podcasts. But by the time we came out, there was a Queen podcast already. I was like, oh God, we're not first to market, God.
You got to have it all, Ro. What was lovely about being a listener at the time, because obviously we've only just met today, was you did get the sense of community around that podcast. Like you say, like someone set up a Facebook page, which I joined as well. And
brilliant.
And there was a very communal sort of, someone would say, oh, just listen to this album today. And I would go from there and go, actually, I think I'll give that a spin today. So there was a real sort of interconnected distance as well, if you see what I mean. Like, I was reacting to what around me. And that was what was lovely about it. It created a community without even knowing anybody at the same time. You know, it was brilliant.
I haven't fully understood that. I mean, I've run into... What's really nice is if I go to a Queen thing, I will run into a couple of listeners, but a couple of listeners, and they'll always be really, really lovely to me. And I remember going to Rogers outside of tour at Shepherd's Bush Empire, and I bumped into a couple of listeners there, and they said exactly what you just said. It's actually, I don't think you appreciate what a lovely... But I do know what that is, and I think that, again, that's about Freddie Mercury tribute and how that imprinted on me. But I have always believed, and I guess I haven't seen enough of the toxicity in fan groups across, because we don't even get that on the Queenpod fan group page. We don't get much mean.
No, you don't. No.
But I've seen little glimpses of it on other Queen feeds, and it can get a bit mean. But I've always believed that Queen fans will always get on. So if you just take a Queen fan who might be a Trump supporter in Ohio, and a Queen fan who's a Maori in New Zealand, put them in a room together, they'll get on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that was the principle behind it. And I think because that was the attitude. Do you know what? Also, like, I think that in a way, like, John or Suze probably should have hosted that show, right? With maybe the Solomon on air, and possibly with me as a little background, I'm a producer voice sort of thing. But I think because John was the one who supported me on this. John was the one who really pushed me and went, "Yeah, no, you should host." We had that was the initial conversation, and I sort of explained where I was coming from. Anyway, you should absolutely host this. This is your journey. You're going back through the albums, and we're going to help you do that with all of our information and everything. He loved that. Yeah. And I think that really appealed to him. So it was John who really supported me going for that. And I think the benefit of that is it allowed me to just be what I am, which is I'm just a guy who loves Queen.
Yeah.
And then that allowed John to be, because he's more of a muso, right? He loves Queen, but he's as critical of them. He's critical in all senses, positively and negatively. Like, he'll call it when he doesn't like something. Disapproves of something. You know, he had his opinion to it. So it allowed him to do that. And then, of course, Suze's musical knowledge is just so valuable. And then we had Simon bringing this actual information straight from the mothership. You know, these amazing, like, little tidbits that he got access to. So it was a perfect sort of dynamic, actually. But I think the heart of it of just me going Bob stuff and just getting cross if anyone criticizes.
That's what I'd say to love about it. You'd all be excited, and then John would go, actually.
Yeah. And then I go, what kind of Queen fan are you? Why don't you like My Baby Does Me?
It's great.
It's brilliant in summer, So I think that kind of, that's the thing that I've noticed the most people. I really, it's the thing I've always wanted, being able to sit in a pub with a bunch of mates and just talk about Queen. That vibe, I think, was sort of baked in by the Happy.
It definitely was.
Group. Yeah.
It was.
You take a touch of credit for that. Yeah.
You're right. It was the right group because you had sort of, someone that was an analytical, someone super excited.
Yeah.
A muso and a historian, if you like. And it was the perfect storm of that. And
it really works.
You're such different characters. That's what makes it. Sometimes it shouldn't work, but it does. You know what I mean? If you wrote it down, that wouldn't work, but it does. It works perfectly. And I think that's why it's the perfect storm. I remember just after lockdown, I went to a gig and someone had a Queenpod badge on. I went, you're one of us. Yeah. And I just see walking through. I just been to the bar and they were coming through the crowd. You just spot it. You go, you're one of us.
I was wearing this. I've got a Queenpod T-shirt on. That you're listening to this instead of watching it, and I was wearing it up at the Edinburgh Festival a couple of years ago. And this Australian bloke just was walking past me in George Square and just went, I had a really good podcast there. And then carried on walking. I went, I'm Ro, it's my podcast. And somebody stopped, turned around and went, no way. I was like, yeah. Sound amazing. So I'm going to catch up with a guy from Australia who happened to be at the Edinburgh Festival. It is cool. But then even then, I'm like, wow, look at how talented those four men are.
Mm.
That 50 years later, 60 years later, we're enjoying like a really low level of, I can't say like a little bit of zhuzh, just in the periphery of that, of that blistering talent. To pick, these guys have been assigned the same number of years as anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've always thought about that. Like, how did Jack Nicholson get to be Jack Nicholson when he's just been given the stage? Like, how crazy talented you have to be? Of course, luck, but those four were so blisteringly talented.
Yeah.
To have had Freddie Mercury as a frontman and then that band.
Yeah.
For that frontman to play in front of. Just wow. To where now in 2024, because I did a little podcast about them, that there's someone with a Queen badge who you run into and go, listen to that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing. And so, in the end, you've just got to hand it to Queen.
It's fantastic. So you adapted the show over now, so it's Radio Pod, and you're still going through the albums. You've just done Hot Space the last time I listened to the podcast, which I think people hate me for this. I think is one of their best albums.
It's a brilliant album.
I think it's a brilliant album. I think it's the last time they were truly experimental as well. And I just think it's great. But why do you think there's heat around that album particularly? Why do you think people kick off?
I think it's a legacy. I don't actually. I think if you ask anyone under the age of 40, I don't think there probably is. But the legacy of its impact is there. So it was an anomaly at the time, and it really annoyed fans at the time. And you still have fans now. Again, generally over the age. I'll say generously over the age of 30, but I do mean over the age of 40. That will go, that you and all. I totally understand why, but I'm only a fan of their 70s stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, at the time, their previous album had been The Game. The one before that was Jazz. I mean, those were okay. The Game had started to introduce some pop sounds, but they were both rock albums. They were rock albums through and through. There were no synths. Up until I think they started to use a little bit of synth. Did they in The Game? Maybe not.
The Game was supposed to.
So The Game when they first started, right? Yeah. So that's who they were, and then they came out with a funk album.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, even now, there's only one famous song of it, whereas all their other albums have at least two famous songs on.
Yeah.
But even absolutely, and You're My Best Friend. They always got a good couple of hits out of each album. and Hot Space lesser. I mean, I suppose Body Language is a little bit more infamous. Maybe people have heard that, but I doubt it. I doubt people have heard Stay Back. So I think it'll always be an anomaly. It's sort of generally the last album that people will get when they're investigating them or getting into them, and you are going into the albums. Because of that, you don't have as many hooks to get you there.
Yeah.
But this is the album that Under Pressure is on. And at the time also, yes, Under Pressure was at number one for 2 weeks, but I don't think it was until Vanilla Ice. Did Ice Ice Baby in 1989, was it? 1988, 1989, where that song actually became more famous, that much more in the zeitgeist, culturally than it had. I don't think it was a very famous song up until Vanilla Ice. At least it wasn't for me. It is an anomaly. I think it accessed them a whole new level of innovation for the 80s and early 90s as well. I think The Works, The Miracle, Innuendo, certainly, and I can't imagine, certainly benefited from Hot Space having happened.
Yeah. I think it's an amazing album. I think it's incredibly experimental. I think it was really brave for the time.
Yeah.
I think it's the one time when the band didn't agree but still created something brilliant. They don't really all agree on it, but it's still a brilliant album. I know people, it's a Marmite album. If people love it or they hate it, I just think it's incredible. I play it probably more. If you had to pick an album, The Game's probably my favourite, and Hot Space second.
Me too. Second, that's awesome. I think when the sun is out, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
Put on. It just sounds amazing. If you're lucky enough to drive with the top down, you could do worse than put on the Hot Space album, I think. I also think it's been reevaluated. And I think now that it sits in the context of 15 contained studio albums, right? That is what it is. 16 if you count spots. You can if you want to. But certainly those 15 albums they did through to Made in Heaven, I think contextually, I don't think it's as egregious as it was during their recording life.
Yeah,
during the period where they were active, right? And even for a good decade and a half at least after Freddie passed, right? But now in the 2020s, why are you like? It's hard to even see how it's anomalous. It's not even that anomalous, right? So I think it's sort of had. I think it's had a lot of. I think it's had a reappraisal, and also the other albums have been played to death. Nobody's really played Hot Space to death unless they're clever like you or me. So I think also like it's sort of getting played a bit more. I think it's more. There's more there to discover, but it's fun. It's fun. It's a really cool sound. Yeah.
As Freddie said, it's only a bloody record.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you're following the albums in sequence. When you get to the end of the albums, have you got plans to go past that and do other Queen gigs? Or are you going to sort of sign off when you get to the end? Or?
Well, I think the thing... So, when Queenpod ended, it was a bit brutal for all of us. None of us were really happy about it. And then, obviously, the listener reaction was so supportive and so sweet and kind of heartbreaking as well. But what was nice was a lot of other Queen pods had started by then. So we had Recovering Queen and Seaside Pod Review as well, which was great. So there was more activity going on and all of that. But in the back of my head, I'd always just wanted to, because my whole thing was, okay, I'm going to get through the 70s in order to get to the 80s. I was really excited to be looking at Hot Space and The Miracle, actually, in particular. I was really to see John had to say about The Miracle. I might see if I can get him to pop in and offer me some insights on that one. But yes, that then became very much a little personal project. So I had a chat with Simon and went, look, what do you think if I did this? I won't be using the music at all. I know we can technically use 30 seconds of music. I'm like, no, I'm not going to touch the music. Got a solution for it. I'll just ask people to go listen to the track, and then come back and hear us discuss it. Want to do it, they can, and they just want to hear us chat about it, that's fine. But we don't. But Queenpod was what it could be because we had the music. Radio Pod is what it is because we don't have the music. So because we don't have the music, we don't have. It doesn't matter so much if it's not like the biggest. We don't get a really good reach, and we don't, if it's just a few hundred people that listen to it, that is fine. We don't have to sort of go, well, what's the ideal running time to get, to maximize the success of the project? Anything like, I don't care. We'll just put it out at whatever length it needs to be. I don't care. It's more for me, really, like quite selfishly. It's just sort of, it's for me and anyone that wants to be part of that. Like, it's also, it's also for, definitely for the Queenpod listeners, the listeners that listen to Queenpod, definitely. But I wanted to complete the journey, and I knew I couldn't do it with the Queenpod guys, and so I'd met Paul Bradbury. They did this Queenpod AGM one year, where we all got together in a venue in Soho, and just met everyone, and there was a quiz and a Q&A with Simon and stuff like that. But there was a little podcast studio next door, so I just went in there, and people that had attended the event, they could come in, I think 3 or 4 at a time, and just sit with me and do a bit. And we just chatted about the Rhapsody tour, which was happening at the time. And Paul had come in and sat next to me for one of those, and I clocked that he was incredibly articulate on radio, and he had a really good voice for radio. But also we had just a really good rapport. I clicked with him very easily. That's not to say there weren't lots of people in that room that day that were just wonderful. I had a great time with everyone, but it just stuck in my head. And I wondered if I did it with him, that it would be much more clearly for the existing fans of the pod, rather than necessarily trying to bring in a whole new set of fans. That wasn't really the priority. I just wanted to complete the stereo album. So that's really how it all came about. Blessing said yes, and it worked, thank goodness, and everyone's been really lovely about it, just also awesome. But in a way, it also enabled us to get right back to how we started on Queenpod, where the episodes were long and we had heaps to say, probably too much to say. So it is very satisfying. We're about to start. We've had a little break over summer for a few weeks. We're literally about to start with The Miracle. We're starting to record new episodes next week. Mm-hmm. So we've got up to a kind of magic. Something that has opened things up. So the objective was always, let's just complete the stereo albums and we're done. And that's how I got my son to agree to do it all for free as well. So, let's just do this. And that's all it is. And he was like, yeah, okay, I'll. So bless him, Sam agreed. Because that is, I can't remember how many albums we had back. Is it 8 to 16 episodes or whatever it was? It was a finite project. In the back of your head, you're like, yeah, but I really want to look at My Bad and Dangerous to Know, but across. And, do you know what I mean? There's certain things, like we haven't looked at Strange Frontiers, and we haven't looked at Barcelona. So there's there are certain projects that you're like, oh, I'd love to be able to do that as well. However, it has been very purely, let's just do the studio albums. Interestingly, what changed was right at the end, just before the break, we had a look at Queen at Wembley, 86. And that's because that was Paul's suggestion. It was like, look, we've just got to the end of Kind of Magic. It is the end of their touring life. We should look at Wembley 86. And then we thought, well, how are we going to do that? And I happen to know a comedian called Garrett Miller, who's a brilliant comedian. It's his favourite Queen album. He adores it. And he'd never watched it. So we decided to watch it and do a commentary to it, release that as a podcast. It's a 3-hour podcast. It's like 2 hours of it is the gig. And an hour of it is chatting about the gig. But it worked. I couldn't believe it. It worked. Like we didn't, we put it out and everyone was like, yeah, this is great. And so I've had a little bit online of, oh, would you be interested in us doing stuff more like this? And certainly Sam and I had that conversation. Paul's been busy over summer, but Sam and I had a chat about it, and Sam seems to be keen to do more than just the studio albums now. That changes things. So yes, I wonder. It's very addictive. Like, having spent a period not having a Queen podcast, it's a lonely, unseen place. Whereas being a teeny bit famous to a very small group of people, it's a very addictive thing. So yeah, I wonder if, it's good for the ego, it's good for the soul, it's very good for my mental health, I have to say. And the fact that, when you find out it's actually good for other people's mental health as well, that's a good thing. So
one final question before we go. So
don't do short answers. I need to.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Sorry.
My friend said to me, taking Freddie Mercury out of the equation, if you could do one Queen-related thing, like now, what would you do? Well, if I can go away with one, say, right, anything Queen-related you could have happen, what would you do? And I said, I'd sit down with John Deacon and have a chat for about an hour and a half. I think that'd be perfect. For yourself, what would you do if you could, like Freddie's, you can't put Freddie into it, but if you could do anything else, what would you do? Even if it's like a dream gig or something like that, what would you pick?
Well, I'd front the band. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? What else is there? I would be the Freddie Mercury with the three of them, and no Spike, just the three of them at Wembley Stadium. Thank you very much. Of course. That's the actual thing. Like, if I could do anything, that would be the actual thing. That's just what I wanted to do since I was like 12 years old. So yeah, obviously that. But the real answer of what's actually achievable I think John's a really, really good one. Like, when I recently moved into the Putney area, and Simon was like, if you run into him, would you just please, see if you can just see if he can have it. Because John Deacon's like a unicorn for something. So we did a little interview with Ben Elton about being Rocky on the Queenpod, and Ben mentioned that he'd been taken down to meet John to get his, and John gave him his approval. And I watched Simon going fanboy over that.
Yeah.
Like, his eyes just got shiny. It was like, for Simon, that was a really big deal. So yeah, obviously John being a unicorn's a big one. I think, to be honest, I've sort of done it. The thing that I really wished I'd get to do. I got to make the Time Traveller music video for Back to Light with Brian.
Awesome.
And I got a Queen nickname behind the Barbarian to Brian over that process. And you know that thing of, I reckon if I got to hang out with them, I'd get on with them really well. I did. I got on with him really well. He thought I was a really sweet guy. And I think that thing of, if I died tomorrow, that's happened now. I am really, really happy.
It's a fantastic podcast. I'll put links in the description. Ro, thank you so much for joining me today and talking Queen. It's been amazing.